Welcome to another special episode of Bossing Up Overcoming OCD. I'm your host, Erin Davis, and today my guest is the host of her own podcast called Emotionally Unavailable. In her show, she has conversations around transformation, around each guest's journey to self-love, self-fulfillment, and I've also been featured on her show. So be sure to check out the Emotionally Unavailable podcast with Malisa Heppner. She started her journey from working as a hospice social worker to now an inspiring therapist and podcast host. In our conversation today, Malisa goes deep into her personal challenges, the critical issues she faced in childhood, the religious trauma, childhood trauma, and how she has begun her own self-growth journey through building self-love, self-trust, and setting boundaries. We talk about women's issues, generational trauma, societal programming, and how women can start to use their voice in today's age and space. I'm super excited to bring you this authentic conversation. And before we get into the show, let me tell you about my good friends at Thrizer. If you're a therapist, Thrizer transforms the way clients interact with their out-of-network benefits. As you know, clients need to manually submit super bills for out-of-network sessions and wait months for reimbursement. With Thrizer, clients can just pay a copay for their sessions while Thrizer covers the rest of your full rate up front. They handle everything from verifying out-of-network benefits, submitting claims, to waiting for reimbursement on the client's behalf. In turn, they are an incredibly powerful tool for you and your practice to convert and retain private pay clients. You can try Thrizer completely for free with my link. Link is in the show notes, or you can simply go to join.thrizer.com/Erin. Okay, let's listen in on the conversation between Malisa and I. Okay. Well, Malisa, I'm super excited to be chatting with you today, and it's just a pleasure to be in the same room with you, honestly.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. You look gorgeous too.
Oh, thank you. Well, so Malisa, you are the podcast host of the Emotionally Unavailable show. Super fabulous show. And it seems to be centered around a lot of people's own stories and the way they have overcome something and really have been a champion in their own life. And you're also a social worker, is that right?
Yep, I am.
Awesome. So tell me more about you or, some things, that led you into podcasting.
Well, I mean, gosh, everything led me into podcasting probably because I've wanted to
Uh-huh.
be a star my whole life. But
You are a star, my
thank you so
friend.
much. Thank you. Yeah, okay. So truthfully, I've had such a wild career. If I look back, I mean, not, I don't know, maybe wild's not for, it's been a wild ride, I'll say. So yes,
Yeah.
my background is actually in hospice social work mostly. And
Wow.
then I got kind of burnt out on that because honestly, the thing for me was I got tired of feeling unsafe in the environment because I was going in strangers' homes, and
Yes.
because of who I am and what I can tolerate, I always got the territories where it was extra scary, you know what I mean? And so it just got to where, like, the older I got and I had my last kid, while I did that job, I was pregnant, putting myself in situations that didn't feel safe. I got kind of burnout. So I left that, and because of my middle child who has all kinds of diagnoses and trouble in school his entire life, I was like, I want to be the type of teacher I wish my son had. And I live in a state where you now no longer even have to have a degree to be a teacher, but we won't go into that. But
Ah,
it was very easy to, in the like inner city, to become what's called emergency certified and become a teacher. Immediately I knew that was not smart that I did that. I do
oh,
believe it was
really?
meant to be on my path, but it was an incredibly difficult job. I way
Yes.
underestimated what it would take. But I did realize, okay, I'm really good at connecting with these kids. Me and math are not friends. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I had fifth grade and I loved them so much. Inner city kids, like we're bonding, but I could not teach them to save my life. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch over to something more suitable for me. And I did school counseling for 4 years. The
Yes.
state of education in America is in crisis, and
Mm-hmm.
I reached burnout very quickly. What I learned about education is that, and I mean this from a place of love and compassion, truly, but it calls to the codependent. It really does.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
because I had boundaries, because listen, I've done
Yes.
hospice for all these years. I know about boundaries in the workplace, you know?
Yes.
I was very unpopular, very unpopular. And the dynamic between each role within education really pits. It's like your boss at the top of the state of education, regardless of who we have right now, who truly is a narcissist. But like, if you think of narcissist models, that's kind of how it is. And they pit you against each other and they do things like, thank you so much, so and so and so and so for filling out the survey. You know, it's just things like that. And I'm
Oh,
not healthy at all. I didn't go into that job in a healthy place. I left it in a place where I had crumbled, and I hit like a mental health crisis,
oh my goodness.
burnout in every area of my life. And I was like, okay, it's time to address the dissatisfaction in our lives. And what is my role in this? And how can I heal? Finally, you know, I had a really extensive history of childhood trauma. So
Yes.
there's been healing along the way, obviously, because I was a functioning adult, but it wasn't enough. And so when I got to
Mm.
that place, I just was like, all right, how do we heal? What are our dreams? How can we pursue ourselves relentlessly without stopping? You know,
Wow.
so that's what led me. I mean, I felt silenced my whole life. I love to talk. So I was like, podcast.
Uh-huh. Yes. And I enjoy listening to your podcast. And it sounds like you've been through a lot of things and you have persevered and you have a lot of resilience about you. And I was also curious, based upon the conversations we've had in the past, like you've had some religious trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Oklahoma. You know, it's really fundamentalist here, no matter what you believe. Like you can go to the most relaxed environment and it's still going to, I think the part that hurt me the very most, once I uncovered all of my shame, was the premise that I was born dirty, unclean, and unworthy, and there was nothing I could ever do to earn those things.
Mm-hmm.
That was really the message that I was given, and that any worth and value that I could accrue could only be done through the eyes of God. And so it was really tricky, kind of coming to a place. Well, and you know, everything in religion tells us that servitude to our own demise is our purpose on this earth. And so
Yeah.
for me, coming to a place where I say, no, I think my purpose on this earth was to finally come home to myself and understand that I need to have unequivocal, unconditional love, compassion, and
Mm-hmm.
regard for myself in every moment, even the worst ones, even the
Love
ones
it.
where I'm so mean to myself or someone else.
Yeah.
Those moments, I'm still just as worthy, still just as loved, just as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of lately been my focus. Like, you know how things evolve
Yes.
over and over and you become a new creation like the next month. That's my
Yes.
current focus, is unequivocal, unconditional regard.
Love it. Well, and so many people, especially in the OCD space, they get stuck on pleasing their higher power.
Right.
Because and people
Right.
get very stressed out about that, so it can be challenging. So like,
Well,
what
yeah.
how did you get to that place of like, I'm just going to love myself with unconditional positive regard?
Well, you know, it's an ongoing process. I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie, because as you said that, I just had an aha moment when you said pleasing your higher power. Like,
Mm-hmm.
actually, like, I'm like full body chills right now, because what I found myself doing, even in this more spiritual woo woo place that I am, like, it was like probably last month, um, something good happened. And,
Yeah.
and I said, thank you, but I wasn't saying thank you to myself. And there's so many times that I'm thanking the universe or whatever you want to call your higher power. And I stopped and I said, Melissa, maybe that gratitude's supposed to go to you, babe. You got up every day. You hustled. Like,
Yes.
you've overcome technology issues. I mean, if you even understood the amount of crying, and I mean wailing, when I
Oh
first started this
no.
podcast because of all
Yes.
the tech issues, because I
Yes.
decided perfect is the enemy of good, and I do not care if this is perfect. I'm doing what I love to do, and I'm going to put it out. I haven't
Yeah.
edited those early episodes again. Like, I left them. They are ugly, but they are
Yeah.
raw, and they tell you the story of how I got there and how this has evolved, and I'm leaving them. But maybe that's the lesson. Like, I did that. And if love for yourself is the highest frequency, is gratitude for yourself not part of that, and
Ooh.
so it's ongoing, where I say, no, I mean, that's fine. Like, yes, thank you, higher power, for supporting my presence on this earth. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that. But also, thank you, Melissa, for having the resilience, for creating, I will say, the resilience within yourself
Yes.
every minute of every day, every single challenge. Dumb things like the computer I'm using currently has a thing where it loves to, if I move my mouse, automatically go to the X to close out the window. And if I'm not 100% focused, it will close out during recordings, during work. It doesn't matter. I was working
Oh
on
my.
a workbook yesterday, and it literally closed 30 times. And I was like, I'm not going to let you stop me. And I kept going.
Yes.
And that's the stuff. And it is evolving. Every day I'm learning more about, oh, that was a sneaky way that you were not loving yourself or having gratitude for yourself. But even, like, I told a story on my show not long ago. I
Mm-hmm.
was almost scammed by some people. They sent
Ooh.
a text saying, hey, it's your bank. Did you spend money in Dallas, Texas? And I was like, no. And I say no immediately on the text. They say, great, we're going to call you. And the second the phone rang, I picked it up and I audibly heard, don't you give them your information. And I
Ooh.
was like,
Interesting.
oh my gosh, you're right. And so they said blah blah blah, and I said I'd really feel more comfortable speaking to my bank directly, like me calling them. They hung
Yeah.
up. I couldn't even finish the sentence. I said I'd feel
They
more
knew it.
comfortable. Yes. And they hung up, and I was like, oh, thank you. But I at that time, I've lost both my parents, and so at that time I was like,
Oh, I'm
thank you,
sorry.
mom, or whatever. But then I was like, stop it. That was your voice. That was your voice.
Oh, I
The
hear it
voice
now.
you know what I
You
mean?
you are giving yourself more credit because that's not something you used to do.
Right. It was everything external of me. And then even just that, like, am I
Yeah.
doing enough, universe? Like, I'm sorry that I had this
Mm.
negative thought. Please don't punish me. It's that whole cycle over and
Yeah.
over. So that's why I say it's an evolution. But, this version of me talking to you in this moment is very clear on what
Mm-hmm.
I deserve. But, I mean, we have all this
Lovely.
baggage, and it's gonna interfere sometimes. But just as long as you can come back to center.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and I totally hear you on the podcasting struggles because in the very beginning, I didn't know how to work my mic. In fact, I didn't even have like a fancy mic to start.
Well, that's why I don't use them anymore, because it's caused so many any issues that happen related to, like, me trying to use something new. And so I'm like, eventually we'll come back to this, but right
Mm-hmm.
now it's not working. So we're just going to go straight on the computer.
Yeah. And I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable because the world needs more of that. And women have a hard time sharing that vulnerability.
Oh, yes. I mean, and I'm the number one. I mean, it's really easy in an environment like this for me to say anything. Honestly, that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to my husband to say I'm stressed, that's hard for me. Or to say, shoot, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
that's a real vulnerable spot for me, is to say I'm sorry, or even just ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of I'm too much comes out a lot whenever I go to ask for help. And I have
Yes.
to overcome that every single time. And I don't always overcome it. And sometimes I do it wrong. And I continue that little hinty thing that sometimes we like to do, instead of just
Mm-hmm.
coming out and directly saying. But yeah, I mean, I always say it starts with one decision and then a confirmation of that decision every time it comes up. I'm still going to have the negative self-talk. I just have to stop it and revise
There
it
you
in the
go.
moment. I'm still going to have the fear. I just have to stop and talk to myself in the moment. It's just
Yes.
reconfirming those decisions over and over.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you're putting that because it's like, yeah, these thoughts are going to come, but I'm going to handle it different. I'm going to respond to it differently. And
Absolutely.
your responses now are more about this self-trust. And I've been like
Yeah.
on this kick with self-trust
Yes,
lately.
your last episode, I was like resonating with it so hard because, yes, the trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what do you think it is with women, in your opinion, like why we have such a hard time in being vulnerable, like telling our spouse, hey, I'm stressed, or I don't know how to do this, or like, can you help me with this? Like, why do women get so hung up on that part of vulnerability?
Well, somewhere along the way, we were programmed to believe that we're supposed to be superhuman, that
Mm-hmm.
we that we can get such adrenaline that we can lift a car off our child. That we,
Yes.
you know what I mean? We're you've heard the stories, like we
Yes.
were programmed to believe that is you, that's what you have in you, go be that. Well,
Uh-huh.
hey, I am a superhero sometimes. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's times that I'm just a human and I'm perfect at all of it. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I'm so imperfect at anything that I do, that and humans are supposed to be imperfect. So I'm doing a perfect job at that. I think that we were programmed to believe that we should be superhuman, but I also think women in particular in childhood are raised to turn off to intuition
Mm.
because we are to, well, how many times were we forced to hug somebody we didn't want to hug?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So right there, we just lost agency over our body, and somebody told us that we don't get control over who touches us.
Yeah, and then it's not nice to
Right.
say no to
And that,
hugs.
yes, and that it's more appropriate to make this person feel comfortable by hugging them when everything in our body says, I do not want you to touch me, than it is to stand in our authority and say, I wouldn't like a hug right now, and maybe make them uncomfortable. It's things like that
Mm-hmm.
that our parents did over and over. And I'll tell you why that makes me mad. They only did it because they wanted that person to say, you're raising them right. That's it.
Self-serving.
Yes, that is the only reason they
My
did that.
gosh.
The entire generation, which I talk a lot of smack about, and I'm not going to do that right now, but that was
Mhm.
it. And we were told, your
Yeah,
needs
oh yeah.
don't matter, honey. You know why you're here? You exist to serve your parents and pay an eternal debt of gratitude that will never be wiped clean. I put you on this earth. I raised you. You now owe me. And maybe like if you had nice non-narcissistic parents, it what those weren't the words, but baby, I promise you that was the message, and that was their belief system, is
Hmm.
that, oh, now it's my turn to be repaid back by my kids because I have been an indentured servant to my parents my whole life. It's a cycle that's been repeating. And again, as long as we
Yes.
can get you to turn off to your voice, then what? There's no trust ever from then on, because I now
Yeah.
rely on somebody else to tell me when I can be touched, when I can speak. I don't even make my daughter, and it is uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie to you. It is so uncomfortable. But if we're in public, and you know how the boomers love to call little girls pretty, they love it.
Yes.
And so they come up and they say, oh, look at your pretty hair. She will stare at them. She's not trying to be rude. She's uncomfortable. But I have
Yeah.
told her, it's not our job to make them comfortable. You're uncomfortable, right? Well, why does their comfort matter more than yours? You can
Love it.
say thank you or you don't have to. It's up to you. And I'm going to support you in that moment. And I'll be like, come on, little baby. She's 10 and
Oh.
it's been an evolution. She will just look at them like, please go. She's not
Yes.
comfortable. She's shaking. She doesn't want to talk to you. That's
Yeah.
fine. You didn't mean any harm by it. And that was
Right.
sweet. And we do appreciate the compliment. When we
Hmm.
leave, we're going to say that was nice, but a little awkward, but she's not going to say thank you to you. And I'm not making her.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable how many times I'm sure you run into this. Like, do you still do client work?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how many times we have to say to women, like, you're not responsible for other
That
people's feelings.
exact phrase, that
Yes.
exact phrase. You're not responsible. Why do you feel like you're responsible for that? Yes.
Because we've been programmed. Now,
Yep.
bringing
Yep.
it full circle.
Absolutely. We run around anticipating the needs of everyone around us, making sure some of that's because our mamas were crazy, and you knew like what to look out for,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
some of that's just because like that's what they expected. And it wasn't just subtle programming, it was straight up, here's your role in this family. It
Yeah.
is to do this.
And if you don't do this, you're disappointing us.
Oh, yes. And
Yeah.
the amount of shame and guilt applied to,
Huge.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was like
Yeah, how are
worse
we not
than,
going to doubt ourselves?
yeah. Yeah. And kind of like you're saying, whenever your parental figures are giving you this instruction and direction, they're essentially telling you ignore your intuition, ignore your thoughts, ignore your feelings, put those aside.
Rub some dirt on it and walk it off.
Yeah. Because you need to take care of other people's feelings.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
Uh-huh. And it's interesting to me because I've moved more into like a feminist space in my spirit because I
Hmm.
used to be really closed off to that. But it's interesting to me around some people that I know that called themselves feminist, still perpetuating some of these cycles.
Wow.
This is not like
Mm-mm.
I'm not degrading anyone. We all have our own process and evolution, and this is just where I am versus where they are. But like, I
Yeah.
know
Good point.
someone in my personal life that I'm like, why are you still requiring your adult daughter to show up in an inauthentic manner to please somebody? Like, you are doing it and you are forcing your adult daughter to do it. And they are both very much adults. And I just don't understand it. I don't, because I
Yeah.
don't want anyone in my life to live any part of their life out of alignment with who they are. And
Hmm.
also, this is how we can teach others to
Wow.
live in alignment. Is even the older generations can watch us and go, you're right. Wow, I never thought of it that way. If you step into
Yes.
your authority, they get to see what that looks like. And you're doing it for them too. They didn't do this because they just were born horrible people. It was done to them, and worse even. So like, let's love ourselves so much that maybe those older generations of women can feel a little bit of love for themselves too before they go off of this earth. Like,
Yeah.
they've spent their entire existence in this way and they're
Oh,
not
yes.
changing. So
No.
like, if we can just be an example and be the light instead of perpetuating this
Oh,
endless cycle.
yeah. I feel like we have known each other like forever because that's totally my mantra. I just want to be a light for people.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
That is it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why my program's called the Luminary. Like, everything about what I'm doing, and that's kind of like, through the evolution of the show, I'm like, okay, that's kind of it. Like, I found my light. I'm sharing it with others. I want to talk to people who are doing the same.
Hmm.
And so now I've even had a little better direction of how to steer those conversations, because I'm like, tell me about your light. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I know that that's the work we're all doing in this space. We found something that we feel so passionate about, and it helped us so much. And now we want to share it with others. And that truly
Hmm.
is, that's always been who I am, is to go through something, figure it out, live through it, and then share it with others, because that's kind of
Yes.
my gift. That's where my gift lies, is to use my voice
Yes.
to show people what I've gone through and how I went through it and how they can too. Cause I'm not, yes, I'm magical, and I am me, and I am unique, and I own
It's
every gift
awesome.
that I have, but I don't have gifts that aren't accessible to other people. You know what I, like, you have your own gifts. We are all so magical when we can get into that energy.
Absolutely. Just got to tap into it, dust it off.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware,
Uh-huh.
like, there was some things that I've always known about myself, but other things have come like in just the last 6 months where I'm like, oh, because I've turned on to my intuition and my trust. I listen, I act. I do it.
Hmm.
I don't just listen. I then go, okay. I mean, like, that's why I was really loving your last episode on the self trust, because for
Thank
me,
you.
it really has helped me lean into surrender and the feminine flow, because I had to be in control of everything all of the
Hmm.
time, or at
Hmm.
least feel like I was in control. I certainly didn't have
Yes.
control over anything, including my own emotions or my thoughts. But now, just like leaning into this understanding that, like, I don't know how, but it's going to be fine. And also, I am best served to one step at a time. Listen to my intuition. Which way should I step? Okay, great. Now that I'm here, I will do this step until the next step comes.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of how you've helped yourself in this process. And you know what's so sad is when I get an elderly woman who shares her life story, and it's like, oh my gosh. You know,
Yeah.
they had an abusive husband who
Oh,
either,
they always had an abusive husband. Yep.
yeah, beat her or ran around on her or both.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones who were forced to quit their jobs, who were forced to take care of the kids,
Yeah.
and they had no way out. They weren't financially confident, I guess you could say, to do things on their own. And
No.
yeah, and I imagine there are a lot of women out there, even in our generation, that feel stuck or trapped, or they don't know how to trust themselves. So what would you say is like the first step in this evolution of learning to give yourself more credit?
I would say literally the first step is to make the decision. Like,
Yeah.
not I'm going to try, not I'm hoping, but like I make the decision that from here on out, even when it's not perfect, even when it's messy, I'm going to love myself and I'm going to learn how to love myself as I go. But this is the one decision that I'm going to make. And then again, you just reconfirm the decision. I mean, there's often you can hear me on an episode very recently. I have, oh yes, it just released last week, where I was talking to somebody who's had a ton of success in her writing, like big
Hmm.
author.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, so I'm an author. And she's like, oh, you are? And I was like, well, I mean, and then I stopped and I was like, yes, I am. I am an author because
Yes.
for a second, I was like, I mean, not like you, like I haven't had like
Oh,
success, you know what I mean? Like whatever.
oh,
I mean,
yeah.
yes, I've published a book and blah, blah, blah. But like in my eyes, like you're the thing I'm trying to be in terms of success for writing. So like I'm not like you. But then I was like, yes, I am. Shush. But I revised it
Yes.
right there on the spot. And I said, I'm sorry. Yes, I am an author. And blah blah blah, and I do
Yeah.
that all the time, and I'm not afraid. That's an area of vulnerability that I'm not
Yeah.
really afraid of.
Awesome. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of, again, those programming messages of how parents are saying don't make other people feel bad.
Uh-huh.
So do you think that's part of it? Like you can't give in those conversations sometimes we're not giving ourselves the credit that's due because we're afraid we're going to make someone else uncomfortable.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, because or that, yeah, like am I making a weird comparison to say I'm also a writer when you're actually a quote unquote successful writer? Like, like, yeah,
Mhm.
how many things are we doing without understanding that we are actually caring about what the other person involved thinks
Yeah.
or feels or acts when it really has nothing to do with us? Like that saying, what other people think about you is none of your business. When I really like started just affirming myself with that over and over and over, eventually it made sense. At first it felt like a lie, but I
Okay.
just was like, okay, I cannot, because that was my number one thing. Oh my God, they're going to think I'm a bad mom. And then this, and then this, and then this. I mean,
Yes.
it was nonstop, nonstop.
Yes.
And I was bound by those types of thoughts. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, my entire existence was surrounded by the need to make sure that everybody else was comfortable in the sense that they liked me, that I was pleasing them. I mean,
Hmm.
people pleasing is the same as saying like you need to be comfortable and I don't. My needs don't matter.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's essentially what you're saying every single time you go to do something that is inauthentic to you to make somebody else more comfortable.
Yeah. And the people pleasing is so real. And that's like almost, again, like what's expected for women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no wonder we're burning out. Someone put it in a way that really finally made sense to me. They say, okay, when a car burns out, it's because they've gone far, like they've used more gas than the tank had. So
Oh,
what are and I always picture that backfire, like in a car.
yes.
And that is what I felt because I didn't know how to exist on this planet for me only. Because
Mm-hmm.
even as moms, I mean, we're taught like your kids come first and blah, blah, blah. And I received so much resistance when I started to say, I put myself above them too. Because if I have to
Yeah,
take care of them, I got to be a good person to be able to take care of them. And it's
absolutely.
not a popular opinion. It's not.
Mm-mm.
But it's not like I'm like, if one of us has to eat, I'm choosing me. Like we're not in that kind of situation. But it's
No.
more like, Mom, can you play this game with me? If I don't have that to give and I go sit and try, I promise you, they're gonna wish they hadn't even.
No.
I mean, that I
Yeah,
don't want to be that person, but that is who I am.
right.
When I've reached capacity, that is that. And I'm getting
Yeah.
really comfortable with disappointing them, because that's the thing I hate the worst, is disappointing my children. But I'm learning how to sit with them in their disappointment whenever it's me that caused it.
Wow. That takes a lot of strength as well. And in thinking about how other people either perceive you personally or just for the woman who is afraid of how people judge her, what I am noticing recently is that there are a lot of women who are terrified of thinking that other people view them as a narcissist. Have you ever felt
Oh,
that?
really?
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's interesting, because I would say that happened to me on a personal level, feeling like that. But
Yes.
I haven't had any clients really say that. So that's interesting, but I'm not surprised either,
Yeah.
because if you're around a bunch of people who don't take accountability for their actions, it's
Mm.
easy to see all this material that we have. Narcissism is a word that's thrown
Yeah.
around all the time now. So it's easy for
Yes.
someone to be on a TikTok and see it and be like, oh, yep, that applies. That applies to them. So I haven't had any like clients say that, but I mean, I remember texting my friends, because my someone in my life was calling me a narcissist a bunch for a minute years ago. And I
Mm.
was like, guys, do you think I'm a narcissist? And they were like, okay, so here's the thing. If you were, you would not even ask yourself that.
Exactly.
And I was like, thank you so much for that. But the truth is, I did have a ton of narcissistic traits, because I was very wounded and raised by a narcissist. So I had a lot of the traits, but not a narcissist. But yeah,
No.
being surrounded by people who don't want to take accountability, their
Mm.
accusations are their confessions. So of course they're going to call you that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and at least with these women, that's just one version of them feeling like they're a bad person.
And it's like, why are you a narcissist? Because you want to love yourself, because you want to say no, because you don't have
Yes.
anything else to give. Well, yeah, I mean, because I think what they're actually hearing is you're selfish. And
Mm-hmm.
man, if we could rebrand that word, if we could rebrand selfish,
Yes.
make it mean the best thing ever, how liberating would that be for all women if we could take that one word and just completely turn it on its head and be like, selfish is good. Selfish means I am full of self, that I took all those holes from childhood and filled them with so
Yeah.
much love and compassion for myself, that yeah, hell yeah, I'm putting myself first.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more I do that, the more love and compassion I can show to others. It was not
I
until
know.
I met me deep in the recesses of who I am that I could meet others where they are. You can
Yeah.
only meet people at your current level of healing. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're full of all of those holes, you are no good to anyone, least of all yourself. But hell yeah, I'm selfish.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like they have tried to use, and I say they in like society, tried
Right.
to use self-care as that version of like coming into yourself, but that's not, I
Right,
feel
like
like,
getting your nails done and stuff. And I'm like, baby,
right.
it's so
That's
much
not
more
it.
than that. That's pampering, and we need it. We need it. We need
Yeah.
it. There's a space for that. But you know, even I, as a therapist, really had to sit and be like, how, I don't know how to take care of myself. But you know, like what
Mm-hmm.
do I need? Because I was so turned off to who I was. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't recognize sensations in my body for what they were. Now, when something comes up, I know exactly what I need, because I've listened and I've acted over and over and over. I turned on to my voice, and my voice lets me know all kinds of things. But if you are walking around with your entire existence being to serve others,
Yeah.
You have no idea what you need and when. And it's far more than a pedicure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how would you advise a woman who is super self-conscious about the way other people see her? Like she's worried about upsetting someone, she's worried about
Yeah.
making her partner mad. How do you coach them or, support
Right.
them through that?
Well, a couple of things. I make sure they understand that that is an archetype of shame, that that is a
Mm,
sneaky way that shame comes in and says we have to achieve more to be worthy of love and belonging.
wow.
And we have to uphold a certain image to be worthy of love and belonging.
Yep.
And that is just shame and it is lying. And so when you can confront a lie with the truth, that
Yep.
helps. I mean, when you say, is where is the truth? Where did I learn that? Why do I feel like that's what makes me worthy of love and belonging? For me, it was such an easy answer. My grandma was a narcissist. Like, oh, she programmed me to believe that I had to I didn't have as much of the achievement one. Mine really was
Hmm.
caring about how I was perceived, like
Yeah.
way too much. And so when that was actually the key to my freedom was, baby, that's just an archetype of shame. It's not the truth.
Hmm.
That's not your voice. That's not you.
Wow.
That's your grandma. Turn it off. Now, what do you say? And me in any present grounded moment knows the difference, but me triggered and living through this childhood trauma in my brain, these loud narratives that were just recycling over and over. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I thought that was my voice. I thought this was just a bunch of self-talk. That was my grandma. My voice says, hey, you don't have to worry about that. And again, I
Wow.
just reconfirm the decision over and over
Yes.
and over.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if in the older generations, you hear about narcissistic moms but I wonder if all of that is just a byproduct of the generational traumas, the generational
Absolutely.
conditioning of you don't have a
Absolutely.
voice, you don't matter. Because this has gone on since the beginning of time.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, the older I get and the more evolved through this process I get, the more love and compassion I'm finding for those women
Yeah.
who ruined an entire generation. That's fine. Um, but I think about them in their childhoods, and
Wow.
I know their pain. And that is why I feel a duty to myself and future generations, but also the past generations, because they carried us here. Whether they did a great job of it or not, they were
Hmm.
doing their best. They really
Yes.
were. And we don't have to say it was good enough. We don't have to say anything. What they
Hmm.
did now no longer has anything to do with me. Now
Yeah.
I'm going forward. But I do feel like the women of the past deserve us to heal and offer that ancestral healing,
Hmm.
because they did go through so much. And
Yeah.
I don't like to compare traumas, but I do know they had even less freedom than we do. And
Hmm.
we have a lot of freedom, but we have a lot of ways that men are still removing our power, obviously, especially in this
Yeah.
political climate, but whatever. But like, imagine a person in their 80s now, what a 4-year-old version of them was going through. That
Right.
really, I look at their inner child. That's the only way I can have compassion, because them in their current state, they're kind of mean and whatever, but like, I know where it came from.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
yeah, the more though that you can meet yourself, the more you can see, like, oh, you know what? My great grandma was just like me. She was just like me. And if all of us in this present day are walking around with the exact same narratives as one another, they were too. Only it was
Yeah.
1,000 times worse, because
Yeah.
they
They were a
didn't
lot
have
more.
people around to talk to.
Yes.
They just had
Let
to be perfect.
I know. And, and hearing more about women's history and all the things, I mean, it's scary, like how suppressed they were. I mean,
Yes.
they were the last ones to be able to vote. a-
Mm-hmm.
And women were also not allowed to have a credit card without a cosigner, literally until like the 80s or 90s.
Oh, there's so many things.
Like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. And imagine, I mean, I don't want to imagine too much actually, because it's not good for your subconscious, but
Yeah.
I do. I think about those experiences and like if I mean, because like I've always kind of been the alpha in my relationship. So like
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
cannot even imagine being in a
Okay.
situation where a man had that much power over me. Really. Like
Yeah. I think
I
I'd
might
be
have been a
neurotic.
revolutionary war starter at that time if that had been me. Probably, it's probably good. I was born in the generation I was because I mean
Yes.
I would have for sure been like burned during the Salem witch trials. I sure would have because like I'd be like, you what? I'm allowed to play in the forest at night. Thank you. You can
Uh-huh.
burn me for that. I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hilarious. Yeah. Well, and I mean, kudos to you for really finding your voice and following this purpose. And I feel like that's where, another thing for women, it's like, don't follow your passion. I mean, because passion is like fleeting emotions come and go, but follow your purpose because that's going to give you more fulfillment. So, how has your life changed now that you're pursuing the things that you find purpose in?
Well, I guess probably the biggest way it's changed outwardly is that I've gotten to create a really sweet little bubble around me where I'm not doing things that don't light me up. And so I'm not interacting with a lot of the negativity in the world that I used to because I'm not around that many people except for the people that I'm actively choosing to put in front of me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the biggest way outwardly, but I'd say inwardly I get to grow. I get to spend a lot of time growing every day because when you're any sort of entrepreneur, you there are so many things to overcome within you. It's yes, technology issues, yes, whatever. But the biggest challenge is
Mm-hmm.
overcoming your own brain, and
Mm-hmm.
so I do get this opportunity a lot to sit and look at myself and say, well, what's something else that could be true in this situation? And just like overcome and move through.
Yeah.
And yeah, just getting to really pour into my own development as well as others and only doing projects that light me up, period. Because I love to talk about passion and purpose together, being in
Okay.
alignment to be your most authentic self. But the thing is that I think people think, oh, your purpose has to be like what you and I are doing. We're making a stage for ourselves. We're blah 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 blah. Yes, that's
Okay.
I've always felt that to be my
Mm-hmm.
purpose. I have a whole story behind it, whatever, is to be on a stage, very literally. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's me. But like I believe part of your purpose is to, well, I think everyone's parents are going to screw them up, and part of your purpose is to overcome that. But I
Yeah.
think your purpose actually is to find that unequivocal love for yourself, the unconditional
Mm-hmm.
regard where you say, sometimes I'm the nicest person on earth, and sometimes I can be really cruel. And sometimes I'm so hard on myself, and other times I lift myself up really high, but all times I matter just as much. Nothing reduces how much I matter to myself or others, and nothing
Wow.
reduces the fact that I am so loved, so worthy, and so valuable. Nothing external of me changes anything within me. And I believe that is the purpose. And however you want to live out that purpose, that's up to you. You can go use that information to share it with others to be like, baby, love yourself. You can
Mm-hmm.
go and if you felt like teaching was your purpose, you take that love for yourself and you teach those students how the hell to love themselves.
Yes.
Like whatever
Yes.
avenue you're putting that light in, do
Mm-hmm.
it. Do it
Mm-hmm.
big. Radiate.
Love it. That's amazing. And Melissa, where can listeners connect with you or find more about you? I know your podcast, is it on all platforms? The
It is,
emotionally,
yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
emotionally unavailable.
And on Instagram, I have like a link tree that does just the two major platforms of Spotify and Apple for the show. And then my website is empowered with melissaheppner.org.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And I really appreciate your time. Was there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners?
No, I don't think so, man. I just love this conversation. I appreciate
Okay.
you having me on. I love getting to connect with
Yes.
others and share the light.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.